The free world is in danger, and it's up to you and your mech suit to save the day. We're taking a quick peek at Metal Wolf Chaos XD. Metal Wolf Chaos is a game you may have heard of if you frequent the internet, as it's made a bit of a name for itself over the years. Originally released in 2004 for the Xbox and developed by From Software, yes, that From Software, it's a third-person shooter that was exclusive to the Japanese market. What's odd about being exclusive is that the game not only has full English voice acting, but is also very much about the United States of America. I mean, you play as the US president after all. While From Software is mostly known for their Dark Souls series and similar games to it these days, the company has actually been around for a rather long time. They broke into the market in 1994 with Kingsfield, which went on to be its own series, but the company became rather well known for their Armored Core games. Games about giant robots. This means they were very familiar with the giant robot and mech suit theme when Microsoft came knocking looking for something to help their extreme video game box break into the Japanese market. Homegrown companies like Sony with their PlayStation and Nintendo's plethora of gaming machines had made it difficult for Microsoft to find a foothold. Since From Software had already established themselves with Armored Core, it made sense that such a company would be able to help the Xbox brand with its giant robot mech suit game. Whether or not things worked out as planned is up for debate, as the Xbox didn't sell all that well in the Japanese market. The game, however, did get a cult following over the years, with videos of its absurd story and premise popping up all over the internet. Now, Devolver Digital and General Arcade have managed to pair up with From Software in bringing the game to the rest of the world with Metal Wolf Chaos XD. The question is, was it worth it in the end? The premise of Metal Wolf Chaos XD is the game's real drawing point. Players take on the role of Michael Wilson, the 47th President of the United States. Things have not been going well for him lately, as his Vice President, Richard Hawke, has taken control of the US military and used them to perform a coup d'etat to take over the country, and kick Wilson out of office. Hawke has been very quick to abuse his newfound power and roll with an iron fist. First establishing martial law, then creating a plethora of mass and weapons, as well as taking a multitude of hostages and doing all kinds of horrible things, like killing citizens with poison gas and selling them into slavery. So yeah, he's not a great guy.
Miami, trafficking them into overseas white slavery.
Hawke's tyrannical position lets him control the media and spin everything he's doing however he likes to make him look like the hero, as well as demonizing the former president. Wilson's not going to take all of this lying down, however, and takes matters into his own hands. Using his military experience, as well as a large mech suit called Metal Wolf, he heads out to purge the US of Hawke's forces and deliver his own justice by restoring freedom state by state and city by city. It's a ridiculous premise to be sure, and one that knows exactly what it's trying to be. The game is extremely quotable due to its multitude of outlandish voice lines performed with the same level of crappiness one would expect from an old localized game. There have been a ton of games brought over to the West from Japan, and it took them a long time to figure out exactly how to do voice acting and localization correctly, since a lot of it was rather poor. Games like the original Resident Evil, as well as Sega's House of the Dead series, became widely known for their terrible writing and horrible vocal performances.
To protect the life cycle, I have made a creature to rule over mankind.
Metal Wolf Chaos just so happened to be right in the middle of all of it. While I can't say any of the main characters' voice work is absolutely terrible, there is definitely room for improvement. Characters have some very awkward delivery and take the ridiculous things they are saying rather seriously.
And the reason is because I'm the president of the great United States of America.
It's a big case of so bad it's good, and personally, I wouldn't have it any other way. Richard Hawke's performance specifically is just, oh, it's just so grand.
Hey there, Michael. Are you still playing the hero?
Gameplay-wise, however, things can be quite polarizing. You see, for all its oddball premise and the fact that its developers have had success with robot and mech games before, and the fact that Metal Wolf Chaos XD is somewhat of a remaster of the original Xbox game, the game's mechanics are just kinda mediocre. The version I played was for the PC, specifically from GOG.com, and while I found the base gameplay fun enough, I can't really say there's all that much depth to it. President Wilson expertly extends his right to bear arms by arming his arms with armaments to use against the army who are well armed with armor and firearms themselves. 99.9% of what you're going to be doing in this game is shooting. You got everything from normal everyday soldiers to giant tanks making ripe targets, and a plethora of weapons to make introductions with. There's handguns, shotguns, machine guns, bazookas, grenade launchers, missile launchers, sniper rifles, railguns, multi-missile launchers, and even flamethrowers. If all that fails to do the job, you can always use your body as a weapon to walk all over your enemies, and if you take out enough of them, you get the option to fire everything at once.
The gas will reach a fatal density in another 3 minutes. Metal Wolf.
Now that is just beautiful. Being an amazing presidential fighting machine, Metal Wolf can dual-wield pretty much anything, and each of its hands have their own slots for holding weapons. Each of the mouse buttons corresponds to a different hand, be it the right or the left, so weapons can be fired individually or both at the same time. It's important to keep in mind what you have equipped and when, as different types of enemies are vulnerable to different things. Armored foes can shrug off live ammunition but fall apart with energy weapons, and vice versa. The real thing to pay attention to is if something is shooting missiles at you. Bullet-firing weapons like handguns, machine guns, and assault rifles can shoot missiles out of the sky, and the game has a bit of an auto-aim for dealing with them as long as you're looking in their general direction. These things, along with weapons and limited ammo, means I was constantly changing up what I was using, and nothing particularly felt completely useless, though some were a lot more helpful than others. Railguns in particular didn't do all that much for me, since they take a while to charge up before firing and didn't really seem to do all that much damage, but other than that, everything else has their place. Swapping weapons is pretty easy to do just by pressing the middle mouse button, but it's a bit finicky how it works. Opening the weapon inventory lets you cycle through whatever weapons you took on a mission with you, but you're sort of locked into it until you pick something. There's a neat little animation of the mech opening up to reveal its arsenal that helps it feel more realistic, or at least as realistic as a large mech suit can get. But the only way to pick different weapons is to press the left or right mouse button to slowly swap from one to the other. If you happen to pass by the weapon you want, there's no going back, and instead you're forced to go all the way around again and hopefully pick the right one this time. Even if you only want to change one weapon at a time instead of both, opening the inventory affects both arms at the same time, leaving you completely defenseless when cycling through everything. I understand this system was designed for a controller in mind since the game was originally a console exclusive, but that doesn't make it play any better on PC. Look at this keyboard. Look at all of these beautiful keys that go completely ignored and could be used to make swapping weapons something easy to do on the fly, but they just don't do anything. It would be so much easier for each weapon to have its own key, like how most shooting games go about things, and I found myself taking stupid damage while just running around trying to pick the gun I want to shoot things with. Oddly enough, one thing they did give its own key was taunting, which is pointless. Taunting is usually something specific to multiplayer games in order to annoy other players, but there's no multiplayer component in Metal Wolf Chaos, and the AI doesn't really care what you yell at it, nor how much you do it.
Come on, next shot. Bring it on. And whatever. Oh my God. Oh my God.
The biggest issue with this entire system is how the game goes about teaching it to you, and by that, I mean it doesn't. Metal Wolf Chaos XD surprisingly doesn't have any kind of tutorial or anything. The first level just kind of drops you into the middle of a bunch of enemies and says, good luck determining what does what. It's not too bad to figure things out since most controls are rather generic for a keyboard. WASD walks the mech around while the mouse button shoot and covers the camera. Spacebar jumps and shift activates thrusters for dashing or running. It's pretty standard stuff. The only real issue is when the game tries to get fancy. That 0.01% of the game that isn't shooting is platforming, and poorly implemented platforming at that. There isn't a whole lot of it throughout the game's runtime, but a couple of levels, such as the Grand Canyon, are centered around it, and it really sucks. This mission in particular takes place on narrow ledges next to insta-kill death pits, and is full of bridges across said death pits that can also be destroyed. Metal Wolf's basic jump is rather pitiful, and I became more familiar with the game over screen than I wanted to just trying to navigate the canyon. It was only after looking up a walkthrough video after dying one too many times without knowing what to do that I figured out that the mech can sort of fly. Big thanks to Kino Conformist, by the way, for their video. If you first jump into the air and then press the shift key, you can dash forward for a short amount of time. Dashing uses up a heat meter on the upper right corner of the screen, and once the meter is up, it'll start draining your shields until you take damage from overheating. The game does nothing to teach you that this is something you can do. Pressing shift while standing still on the ground will also lift you straight up in the air to get more verticality than you can get from a basic jump. But it's real finicky to get working correctly. I do have to admit that zipping around through the air does look pretty cool once you figure out you can do all this stuff. What makes all of this a real problem is the fact that the game doesn't have any kind of mid-level checkpoints. Levels are generally pretty open, with a yellow and red line shown on the minimap to indicate where the boundaries are. Most levels are also rather large, and can take a good amount of time to navigate. Time that's completely wasted if you die and have to fully restart the mission. Luckily, this rarely happened to me outside of falling into death pits, since the game is kind of on the easy side. I rarely found myself on the low end of the health pool, even with the multitude of bosses throughout the game. The main thing when dealing with them is just figuring out what part you gotta shoot to do actual damage. There was a couple of times with some of these bosses where I'd be shooting at them and their health bar just wouldn't be going down, and it didn't really seem to make sense as to why. Nothing indicates vulnerability spots or anything like that, it just kinda tells you to shoot at the thing, and that's what I did. And sometimes it didn't seem to work. There's about 14 or so missions in the main campaign, and I only found maybe 2 of them to be a real challenge that I had to tackle multiple times. Finishing the game once will unlock a New Game Plus mode, and that's where things start to get interesting. New Game Plus adds 2 more ways to play each level: Fever and Hell Mode. Hell Mode makes enemies do more damage and able to take more damage, but players get to keep their weapons from their previous playthrough, which made me more than well equipped to deal with anything the game threw at me. Honestly, I found a lot of Hell Mode easier to get through due to this, but there were a few times here and there where I ended up getting one-shot by bosses, so there is some danger to it. Fever Mode, on the other hand, lets you run around a level with infinite ammo and wreak all kinds of havoc. It can be really cathartic to go back to a level or a boss fight that gave you trouble the first time around and just utterly demolish it in Fever Mode. And yes, Warren, I'm talking about you! This guy was a real pain in the butt. Here's a tip for the Warren boss fight. At the start of the mission, shoot at his missile launchers as each one can be individually destroyed. Once those are dealt with and he starts moving, try to focus on the main gun and side turrets till the front of the tank opens up. Once that happens, just lay on the fire button till something dies. Be it the boss, you, or the Statue of Liberty. Trust me, it makes sense in context. Also, be sure to completely ignore the game telling you to shoot the tank's treads, since doing so doesn't actually seem to do anything.
That's an ironclad battle tactic.
Fever Mode is also a good way to easily look around for collectibles. Hidden throughout each mission are energy pods for the finding and hostages for the saving. Energy pods give your mech more health points after you collect 5 of them, so it's always good to grab one when you can. Hostages, on the other hand, are a bit more complicated. They're kept in specific hostage crates, and if you use anything heavier than light armaments, you'll not only destroy the crate, but also kill the hostage. Sometimes these crates will have bombs attached to them that will explode after a short period of time once you get close by and if you haven't opened them up yet. And if you try to crack them open by stomping on them with your mech, which works great for breaking any of the other breakables in a level, you will kill the hostage, which is very bad to do. There are 3 types of hostages you can find in these specific crates, and each one does something a little bit different. Saving normal citizens will increase the economy bonus of that level you saved them in, meaning you'll get more money upon its completion. Scientists, on the other hand, raise the technology level and give a bonus to rare materials, whereas musicians unlock songs that can be set to play for different situations. Money and rare materials can be dropped from enemies as well, and you really want to get as much of this stuff as possible. In between missions, you can spend both of these resources on researching and manufacturing new weapons. The stronger the weapon, the more of each it takes to get, and levels can be replayed as many times as you want if you're saving up for something special. This can be really beneficial for New Game Plus, since it opens unlockable weapons that generally cost a lot to make. Every level gives you a score for enemies defeated, damage taken, and the number of rushed or chain combos you did during that level. Chain combos are just getting a bunch of kills in a short time, but I'm really unsure what a rush combo is supposed to be. The game doesn't really tell you. How well you did in each category also affects how much money you get for that level, and everything's kept track of throughout the game in your records section, along with a few other stats. Getting an S rank for different stats are how you unlock the special weapons, such as getting an S rank in Destruction, letting you make a grenade launcher that shoots footballs, or getting an S rank in KL points, giving you a flamethrower that shoots bubbles. My favorite would have to be the S rank for shooting down missiles, which is pretty easy to get and gives you a missile launcher that shoots freaking sharks. The effectiveness of these unlockable weapons widely varies, and every level you beat in Hell mode also unlocks a new paint job for Metal Wolf. I don't understand why the devs hid all this stuff behind a New Game Plus, since by the time I'd gotten to it, the game had really become old hat. Overall, Metal Wolf Chaos XD is a solid game, but it definitely has its problems. While the story is just amazing in its own right, the lack of depth and strategy makes its gameplay only enjoyable for short bursts of time. The Metal Wolf mech is just so overpowered that there's little that feels like a challenge unless you happen to be one of those who care about getting the best score possible. Many games with overpowered player characters have the issue where things can quickly just get dull, and this game is no exception. While I did have a fun time playing through it twice, once on normal difficulty and once in Hell mode in New Game Plus, I can definitely see why people would be unsatisfied with the game as a whole. The strongest thing is really its premise, and without it, it's mostly a mediocre third-person shooter. Fun here and there, but not something I'd see many coming back to time and time again. I also experienced some technical problems during my time with the game as well. For some unknown reason, I would be hit with massive amounts of slowdown, where the frame rate would dip to a crawl for no apparent reason. Sometimes this would happen when a lot of things were destroyed at once, which kinda makes sense as to why that would affect stuff, but other times it would happen when nothing was going on. I've also had the game crash on me a few times, and it even caused my computer to overheat and shut off in the middle of a level. On the surface, there doesn't really seem to be a reason for all of this to happen. I mean, the game's from 2004, and it looks it. I can only imagine there's some kind of optimization issue somewhere causing the program to do a bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff at once that makes these things happen. Still, I had a ton of fun with the game, even if its gameplay got stale over time. I do hope that somehow someone makes a sequel to this game now that it's made its way to the rest of the world that would fix up these problems, since the premise still has a lot of potential. If you're a fan of third-person shooters or are just looking for something to turn your brain off and get some enjoyment out of, then I'd say give Metal Wolf Chaos XD a try. Just don't expect a lot of depth out of it. Thanks for watching. I've been MegapiemanPHD, and I'll talk to you guys later. Want to see more giant machines? Check out my quick peek on Monster Jam Steel Titans. Or if you just want more carnage, you can watch my rewind review of Destruction Derby, the MS-DOS version no less.